In melodic drumming and the ostinato part 2, we're going to be dealing with extending a lot of the concepts that I first started on my DCI video, Solo Drums, and later built upon in melodic drumming in the ostinato part 1. In this, I guess to begin with, I'd like to say I try to approach the drum kit like a small microcosmic orchestra. I try and play as musically as I can at all times, developing themes and melodies, trying to keep in mind the fact that music is melody, rhythm, harmony, and dynamics. I try and think compositionally. I try and think in terms of colors and textures. And, utilizing everything that I have, all 4 of my limbs and all the knowledge I have in all of those areas of music, to bring it together to do very melodic drum solos. I utilize the concept of ostinato, which is a repeated musical phrase, quite a bit in this video. Basically, what I do is I designate one of my limbs or one or more of my limbs to hold on an ostinato pattern, and that becomes my accompaniment, and then I solo against that using the remaining limb or limbs. And in that way I can accompany myself and make some interesting music, hopefully. It's also really my pleasure to be able to play drum music, solo drum music, for drummers who understand and appreciate this. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to, hear on the radio, but it can open up doors for the commercial drummer as well as students to just broaden their horizons a little bit and hopefully expand and evolve our use of the modern large drum kit. A lot of people ask me where I get my ideas, and sometimes my ideas come from inside me. I'll get an inspiration, and then I have to sort of honor that inspiration by doing the practicing in order to, actually be able to physically execute it. And it's almost like a prayer in a way, That's my way of praying, in a strange sort of way. If you think of maybe the music comes from God, then, or the idea comes from God, because I have no control over the idea part. But I do have control over the practicing if I do get an idea in order to make it happen. But other times, my friends give me ideas. For instance, when I was first doing drum clinics with Remo, there was a gentleman by the name of Dick Marcus who suggested that I use heavy bell cymbals as a hi-hat, and that got me off into the whole spokes hi-hat area. He also suggested me having a sound creation gong, which he said sounded great with a stick, and that added that wonderful color to my kit. So a lot of times my friends give me ideas. Recently I was in Germany, and a good friend of mine, Hakim Ludin, who is a gentleman from Afghanistan. He's a wonderful hand percussionist and Latin percussionist, and he studied tablas and things like this. He taught me a rhythm which is called, it's in 7/4 or 7/8, and it's called a mogali. And it's a rhythm that his grandmother used to dance with the women in a circle with these tar-type hand drums. And he said, well, he taught me the rhythm, which goes like this. And he said, when I first saw you play the double bass, I thought to myself, you must do this rhythm with your double bass. And I thought, well and good, but I don't think I can do that. And I was right. But I practiced it for a while, and it's been a year now since I've been working on that, 9 months or whatever, and I'm now able to solo over this 7/4 ostinato, which is based on this Moghali Afghanistani rhythm. So that's what you just heard in the first movement of this last solo. Basically, I split up the doom and the tek that they play on the hand drum between my gong bass drum and right normal bass drum. I can split my foot and put my foot between the two pedals that I have there and play both of the drums in unison then, or both of the drums simultaneously. And the same thing with my left foot. I can split my left foot so that part of my left foot is on the left bass drum pedal and part of it's on the hi-hat that adjoins it. So I can play those two sounds simultaneously. So with this rhythm, I was able to go right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right, right, left, and do this 7/8 ostinato. On top of that, I got into some interesting polyrhythms. I played 3/4 over the 7/8. I played 3/8 over the 7/8. I played 3/16 over the 7/8. And then there was a time later on where I actually played 5/16 over the 7/8. And we'll get into that a little bit later on. But that was basically the first solo, the first segment of this solo that you just heard. Once again, I try and play thematically and melodically and develop the themes. And, these things happen spontaneously, and I have to be aware enough to be able to repeat them or develop them and, as they happen. Now, this next section, I dealt with a lot of eighth note melodic left-hand ostinato patterns. The first one I did was between my two highest drums, going bing bong, bing bong, bing bong, and then I soloed against that with my right hand on the remaining toms or drums and my right foot. And there's times when I was doing mixed sticking patterns between my right hand and my right foot. And there's times also where I would move my right foot over to the remote bass drum, so I had that other sound and texture in there to try and make a complete, melodic statement. Now, along with this eighth note ostinato in my left hand, I was also playing quarter notes, I believe, with my left foot on the spokes hi-hat. So that was the first part, just dealing with this duple feel, straight eighth note rhythm. Then I expanded that down to include 3 drums melodically. So I was going bing, bing, bong, bing, 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 bong, bing, like that. So you had this sort of cycling pattern going back and forth, up and down between 3 drums. Still a duple feel. Once again, soloed against that with my right hand, my right foot, or combinations between my right hand and my right foot. Then the next segment, we moved into expanding that down to 4 drums. So melodically, I was able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 2, 1. And basically, that is going to make a pattern that's in 3/4. So we get into a bit of a triplet feel there, or a triple meter feel. And once again, same concept. You solo with whatever's left, the remaining limbs of your body. These ostinatos that I'm playing in this section, or all these ostinatos, are basically just ones that I thought of. You're free to make up any ostinato with any rhythm, with any one of your 4 limbs, and solo against that using the remaining limbs, using these concepts that I've been demonstrating. So, if you don't want to, you don't have to copy my particular ostinatos. You're free to make up the ones that you want to give yourself an individual style. But the idea behind this is to utilize all 4 of our limbs so that we can, work at capacity. And also to have this ability to accompany ourselves. When I first started to do drum clinics for Remo, back, I guess it was 6 or 7 years ago, something like that, I thought to myself, I don't want to go out there and play the same licks I played in 1979. I want to, develop some new things. I started to develop these ostinatos because I thought if I was a piano player, I would be able to play something with my left hand and solo against it with my right hand. And I thought, why can't the drums do this, And the ostinato is the perfect way to accompany ourselves so that when we play solo drum music, There's something there, in which we can accompany ourselves. So, at any rate, to make a long story short, develop your own ostinatos, experiment, find your own way. It's basically all an extension of the jazz ride cymbal beat, which traditionally we played with our right hand, and we soloed against that with our left hand or our right foot or our left foot on the hi-hat. And this is just extending that concept to universally, so that we can use any of our limbs as the designated solo voice and the designated accompanying voice. Now, the next section I believe we get into is a foot solo, where I'm holding an ostinato with my hands of 16th notes, starting on the 3rd tom, and then splitting my hands and going to the 4th and then the 2nd tom, and then the 5th and the 1st tom, and then back to the 4th and the 2nd, and then back to the 3rd. So we have this sort of contrary motion happening with our hands, and that's the ostinato. I think it's basic, let's see. Yeah, it's a basic duple feel, and that leaves my feet free to improvise. So I tried to do various rhythms and motifs and things with my feet, sometimes using one bass drum at a time to make a musical phrase or a rhythmic phrase, sometimes playing on the remote bass drum, sometimes playing with my left foot, and then sometimes combining both feet to make a more complex rhythmic phrase between the two voices of my bass drums. And like I said, well, actually I never said this, but a lot of these ostinatos are a little bit new to me and they're a little fresh, so this is a bit of a disclaimer. Some of these parts can get a little bit loose. I'm not perfect at executing all of these things, but you just go out there and you take your chances, and on any given day it can be great or it can be a little bit loose and sloppy. So I have to live my life that way, or else I'd crawl in a closet and just stay there and never come out. So this might be a little loose, but there it is. Okay, and then the final section is an African rhythm, which is based on a tribal rhythm played by an African tribe called the Igbo. And these people I don't really know too much about. This rhythm was suggested to me by a good friend of mine, Bruno Palmieri, who's a journalist in a French drum magazine called Batteur. And I've had a long friendship with Bruno, and he's done a lot of transcriptions and things for me, which will be coming out in forthcoming books and all. And he and I, whenever we get together, he's always got tons of little things he's been working on, and he goes, "Terry, have you thought about doing this?" with his French accent, and at any rate, this was one idea. I thought, yeah, this is a great idea, and it's reminds me a little bit of an old Led Zeppelin tune, also this kind of jun jun di-dun, jun jun di-dun. But it's an interesting pattern, which, once again, I split my feet so that my right foot's playing the two bass drums on the right, my left foot is playing the hi-hat and the bass drum on my left, and I get this real thick jungle-like accompaniment based on this Igbo tribe's traditional rhythm. And then on top of that, I'm free to use my hands to solo and to play melodically, polyrhythmically, do whatever it is that I did on that particular day. Okay, I'd like to talk about polyrhythms now. Poly meaning many or more than one, and rhythm is therefore self-explained. We have more than one rhythm happening simultaneously. The best book I've found, because I can't get into all the basics of polyrhythms right now on this video, especially since other people have written full books on this. The best book I've found for it, which has helped me the most, and I wish I had it before I got the gig with Zappa, because it really would have helped me to prepare for that, is a book by Gary Chafee called Patterns. And the volume, there's 4 of these patterns books. The one I'm talking about is, I forget the number of it, but it's called Rhythm and Meter. And he deals with polyrhythms in there in a wonderful way. He'll draw a line. Above the line is the right hand, below the line is the left hand, and he'll put whatever, 3 on the top line and 2 on the bottom line, or below the line rather, and you have your 3 against 2. And the idea of this is, and then of course you switch hands to be able to do the reverse of that. But he has all the combinations there, 5 against 4, 5 against 3, 3 against 7, whatever, you name it, it's there, basically. And the idea, though, is that you isolate this to 2 sound sources or 2 limbs, and you get to hear the melody that the actual polyrhythm makes. We're all familiar with the 2 against 3, dum-da-da-dum, dum-da-da-dum, where 2 is with my left hand here, and 3 is with my right hand. So you hear this dum-da-da-dum, dum-da-da-dum, and it's very natural, and we all hear that and understand it. Well, every polyrhythm has a similar sort of melodic rhythm that it makes. Now, for instance, 5 against 4, dum-da-dum, dum-dum-dum, da-dum, dum-da-dum, dum-dum-dum, da-dum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't really count that one very well, but basically, you can learn how these things fall together and memorize that sound, and then from either point of perspective, like from the perspective of 5 you can hear a 4 over it, or from the perspective of 4 you can hear a 5 over it. And it's still the same rhythm, or the same little melodic rhythm that it makes. So now, in this 7/8 Mowgli section that I did some polyrhythmic things. There was one spot where I did 3/4 over the 7/8. Now, the best way to deal with this is to actually write out your Mowgli rhythm in 7/8, which is doom doom da doom doom da 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and then put your 3/4 1 2 3 1 2 3 over that. Like 1 2 3, like. Well, basically, you get the idea. And put your 3/4 over that, and it's going to take 6 bars of 7/8 for this 3/4 to come out to 1. Now, that's the cycle that you should practice. And the way I did this was I wrote this out, and it'll be written out in your little instruction book or your little booklet that comes with the video, so you can follow along on this example. The best way is to take each bar at a time in 7/8 and practice that bar, and then start to try and string those bars together. And then in the end, you'll be able to hear how this 3/4 cycles through the 7/8, and it becomes quite natural. It just takes a little bit of time and a little patience. So that's the first one I'm going to demonstrate for you. Now, the next thing we're going to demonstrate is 3/8 over the 7/8. Now that takes only 3 bars of 7/8 to complete the cycle. And once again, it's the same thing. We have our 7/8 melody, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. And on top of that, we're going to do something in 3/8, which is 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. If you write out those 3 bars, which I have done for you in the booklet, take them one at a time, and then begin to string them together. You've got the completed cycle, and then you'll be able to hear how 3/8 sounds over 7/8. I'll demonstrate that now. Now we're going to move to 3/16 over the 7/8. Now 3/16 takes about 3 bars to come out as well. So we're going to first get our 7/8 rhythm, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But in 16th notes now, we're going to be going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, or 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 on top of it. And I'll demonstrate that now. Okay, and finally we're going to deal with a 5/16 polyrhythm over the 7/8 Mowgli rhythm. So once again, we've got our now this cycle takes 5 bars of 7 in order to come out on 1 again. So if you practice each one of those 5 bars and then start to string them together, you'll get the feel for the whole cycle. On this subject of polyrhythms and where I get my ideas and inspiration too, I'd like to mention that I've been accumulating all the music of Igor Stravinsky lately, who's a wonderful 20th century classical composer. And I've also been getting the scores to his music, and I listen to the music and I follow along with the score. I'm not really a good melodic or harmonic reader, but rhythmically I can follow along, and this gives me tremendous insight into the way he combines aspects of orchestration and the way he constructs his compositions. And I get a lot of ideas from listening to this and watching, following along with the scores. And one of the things I notice about Stravinsky is damn near everything that he does is polyrhythmic. If he's written something in 4/4, you can be sure that if you weren't looking at the score, it'll be written in 3/4 superimposed over the 4/4. There's one beautiful little section of music that he wrote that sounds like a very simple ostinato in 4/4 that's split between 2 clarinets, because obviously they have to have space to breathe if they're doing a continuous ostinato. And what he did was he assigned each of the clarinet players to play 7 eighth notes, and then they overlapped on the 7th eighth note, and they kept switching back and forth like this. So he had this sort of 7/8 polyrhythm over the 4/4, which was deceptively simple because you don't really hear them switching off when you listen to it on a record. But when you see it in the score, you realize this idea of 7/8 over 4/4, and it's a real beautiful thing. Plus, pieces of music like his Rite of Spring deal with incredible rhythmic things, rhythmic motifs and changing meters and polyrhythmic things, and this idea of layering polyrhythms on top of each other in an orchestral fashion, which really inspire me, and I try and in my own way imitate that when I play the drums and when I play a solo. A lot of times when I'm practicing, I have to repeat a pattern over and over in order to get it right. And what inevitably happens when I repeat a pattern over is I kind of get into a hypnotic trance. And sometimes my mind begins to wander, and creative ideas come to me when this is happening. Other times, too, I find if I'm starting to play something new and it's really difficult and it takes a lot of concentration, I'm playing very slowly, that if I take a break for a second and give myself the space to not think about that and maybe just improvise for a few minutes to get my mind off it, that when I come back to it, I can do it immediately because I've somehow just distracted myself for a minute, and this enables me to relax and focus more clearly on what it is that I'm doing. So when these things happen to me, if I'm trancing out and I get an idea, or if I'm working on something else and I get an idea about something that's a different, unrelated topic, I keep a notebook by where I practice, and I sketch out these little ideas which come to me. And one of the things that came to me one day when I was fooling around was this concept of breaking up these sort of flam-type rudiments in groups of 2s and 3s to make 5s and 7s. So this is what I'm going to demonstrate for you now, is some of these flam, cymbal, and tom combinations. This first pattern is a pattern in 7 in which I'm flamming with my right hand on a china and my left hand on a higher tom, and then filling in the in-between notes with my right hand on a lower tom. Here's a similar pattern in 7 that is phrased 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. Here's another pattern in 7/4 or 7/8 that is phrased 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. Here's a pattern in 7 that deals with 2 hits on the china. So we're going to be hitting on 1 2 and 4 5. Here's a pattern in 5 that's phrased 2 3. Here's a pattern in 5 where the first 2 beats of the 5 are hit on the cymbal. Here's a final pattern in 5 where we have 1 beat with the china followed by 2 beats with the china. Here's a pattern that deals with right and left hand china crashes in 5. Here's a similar pattern, but it's in 7 that deals with right and left china crashes. Once again, this doesn't deal with all the mathematical permutations of this concept, but it's more to just inspire you with a few licks that I use and that I think are interesting, that are indicative of what can be done in this area. Now I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about these rudiments from hell which I've developed. The rudiments from hell are basically standard rudiments which I've altered to make more difficult, and sometimes they're purposefully so difficult that you can hardly play them. And I found that that's really helped my control and my technique. Where they came from, I'd have to say, came from a gentleman by the name of Rob Carson, who heads up the marching drum department at Remo Incorporated. Rob is a 3-time world champion rudimental drummer, and his hands are phenomenal. And he showed me a couple of stickings that dealt with hand-to-hand flams, and another concept, which is the concept of the flammed ruff, which really opened up my playing. Now, a flammed ruff, I believe I discussed earlier, but it's basically where you have a grace note, and then instead of coming down with a single stroke, you come down with a double stroke. So you have this little double there, and it creates a texture that's unlike playing 3 single strokes. It just has this sort of blah little texture to it that's a wonderful thing. And with some of these rudiments, I've developed the ability to be able to play these flammed ruffs or flams kind of hand to hand and put them in any places in the beat. And this is a great help when getting back and forth around the drums and soloing around the toms. So having said that, and having said that you'll have these, a lot of these variations written out in the little exercise book, I'm just going to demonstrate a few of them for you now. This one here is, had its roots in a single flammed mill. And I've added a flammed ruff where the flam was to make it more difficult. And this deals with a situation where I'm coming off of one of these flammed ruffs, which has a double stroke, and I have to immediately play another right. So I have to recover from the double and play another single immediately. And that's what's so difficult about it and what's so challenging. So when I do these, they sound very discombobulated and kind of like you know, like a broken gallop or something. They're not very precise, but they're interesting technique builders. Okay, now this next one is coming from a flam tap, and only I've replaced the flams with flammed ruffs, so I call it a fluff tap. All right, now this next one is a variation of a rudiment called the patafla-fla. And that basically has hand-to-hand flams over the bar line, or over the bar line, let's say, if you're talking about a four-note pattern. And I've replaced those hand-to-hand flams with hand-to-hand flammed roughs, which are very difficult to play. So here's patafluff-fluff. All right, and finally, we have kind of a variation on paradiddle-diddle. And I've got some extra flams and flammed roughs in it, so it's kind of complicated. I just want to say in closing that I know a lot of the techniques I've been utilizing are going to seem very advanced if you're a young drummer and you're just starting out. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by the material that I'm presenting here. It's more to just be inspirational, and you have to keep in mind that it took me a long time to get to the point where I could do some of these things, and I'm still working. I'd have to say, too, that I feel that I should mention a lot of the basic books that I have worked through, books that have really formed me as a drummer, that have made me what I am. These books go along with my concept of improvising within a concept and carrying out all the mathematical permutations of whatever it is that you're dealing with, so that you really have a fullness of understanding within a given area. Some of these books I'd like to mention are Stick Control by George L. Stone. For mixed stickings and hand exercises, they're wonderful. Then you can take and utilize those stickings and break them up between various members of your body and play them against ostinatos. So this book has been wonderful for me. Another book that's been great in terms of reading basic rhythms and permutating the basic rhythms has been Syncopation by Ted Reed. It's a very simple, straightforward book that has a whole lot of information in it that I can still use today. And it has a wonderful accent section in it, which is great, and it's really been something that's helped me to develop my ability to crash between the right and the left chinas. Other books for reading that were really good for me were Louis Bellson's book in his 4/4 reading text, and also his odd time reading text. Most of my knowledge of odd times was gained from this book. And once again, these rhythms can be played against any ostinato that's held down by any part of your body, starting with the simplest rock eighth note ride beat to jazz beats, to the kind of things I'm doing, to more. Then another thing for rudiments was the basic Haskell-Haar rudimental books. I found that those were very challenging and very helpful, dealing with the standard 26 American drum rudiments. Also, Edward B. Strait's methods were really good for me. His 2/4 and 6/8 books were wonderful. The way he had his books set up was there was a page of text which was all very encouraging, so you really felt like you had a personal drum lesson from the man that dealt with the concepts involved on the other page, which was what you were going to read for that week. And so I still feel like I have this wonderful personal relationship with Edward B. Strait, whoever he may be, or if he's still with us. But that was a great book for me as well. Also, the Morris Goldenberg book on snare drumming, and it has a lot of orchestral excerpts and things like that. Wonderful book. Portraits in Rhythm by Anthony Cerrone is an incredible book for playing snare drum studies. He deals with dynamics to a degree that I've never dealt with, highly complex, changing meters that are very complex, and just about everything you could do on the snare drum is probably done in this book. It's a really wonderful book. And then, most importantly, the book I'm currently working out of, which is Four-Way Coordination by Marvin Dahlgren and Elliot Fine. This book is fantastic for melodic coordination between the four limbs, and then harmonic coordination, which is what I'm just starting to get into. And my goal is to have four-way independence, so hopefully with that book I'll achieve that goal. And then finally, Gary Chaffee's books called Patterns. He has 4 volumes of them, and they're all really wonderful books. And as I was saying before, the one that deals with rhythm and meter has helped me immensely with my understanding of polyrhythms. So if the things that I'm doing are overwhelming, I encourage you to go back and look at these books. You know, I did a drum clinic one time in San Francisco with Louis Belson, and he's a master. The guy is just incredible. And he said, we're so lucky today because we have so many drum books. And when he started out, there were no drum books, or maybe there was 1 or 2. And now we have all these videos and all these wonderful drummers and incredible books and a huge library and access to a lot of information that can really help our art form to grow. So I really encourage you to study it all and to dig it all, because everyone's unique, everybody's got their own wonderful statement to make, and we can learn from all of it. So thanks very much for being with me.